G'day and welcome to Kenty Blitz, your daily hit of NRL news. We're back on Tuesday. Had yesterday off for the Easter long weekend. Kenty, did you get up to much?
No, not much. I went up the road and watched the Tigers and the Eels play.
On the big screen?
On the big screen, yeah. Enjoyed that. Good game. Eels are back.
Yeah. What about Easter eggs? Getting Easter eggs?
No Easter eggs. But, won't do me any harm. I didn't find any Easter eggs, so no, it's all good.
Did you go to the Easter show?
No, I didn't.
No show bags?
No show bags, mate.
Nothing.
Spent the weekend watching footy.
Okay.
So.
Well, I'm back from Perth. I went over to swim with the whale sharks, and mate, while I was over there, I was a lot of conjecture about your host. Geez, that was big. Big week.
Yeah. Look, tell you what am we looking? We're doing our best. We tried a few last week. I was pretty happy the whole week, to be honest. I know there's, poor old Phelps, he copped a lot of criticism, but I was really happy. I thought Jada was excellent. Tom's always good. Adam Peacock was great. So that was a good week.
Mate, big news. Obviously, huge NRL news today with Lachlan Galvin and the Tigers backflipping. He's back in the team. What's doing there?
Yeah, look, this is just becoming just a pantomime, isn't it, really? The Lachlan Galvin renamed again for the West Tigers at 5'8". I think it really puts to place how ridiculous last week was and how the Tigers came out. And I think, I think I've said this time and again, they've mishandled last week. I think they've got a rookie coach essentially in Benji, who has not really dealt with something like this before. I thought the players were out of line coming out against Lachlan Galvin, doing what they...
Can I ask you a question?
Yep.
When you say they mishandled it, who are you referring to?
Essentially Shane Richardson. Look, it's like this, okay? Galvin came out and all he said was to the club was, I am not re-signing and I'll be going elsewhere after 2026. Now, it got leaked at that point that he didn't have faith in his development if he'd stayed at West Tigers under Benji. Well, firstly, there's not a guarantee that Benji's going to be there for much longer anyway. Like, he's got a contract, obviously, for this year and next year and whatnot, but there's no guarantee Benji will still be there in 5 years. He just wanted out of the club, but the response to it, Shane Richardson, I think, was trying to get ahead of it in some ways to sort of save himself by putting it out now that he told the club. If he didn't tell the club straight away, if they didn't release it straight away, and everyone was waiting, even though the club secretly knew that he was going to not stay, then as it got closer and closer to November 1, everybody would have been going, how come you haven't signed him yet? How come you haven't signed him? You've got to sign before November 1. There would have been increasing pressure on the club when they knew that he wouldn't be staying. And then if they waited till after November 1 and he announces he's going elsewhere, then everyone would say, oh, you've blown the deal. So I think they threw Lachlan Galvin under the bus by doing that. I think the manager of Lachlan Galvin, Isaac Moses, who I don't talk to despite all this bullshit that goes around.
Yeah, can we just make that clear? So everybody's
I haven't
saying you're a
spoken to him
puppet
for, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 years. And even then, it was a bump into him in the hallway and, oh, hey, how you going? And kept walking. And other than that, Warren, I reckon I've had 2 or 3 conversations in my life with him.
So when was the last time you spoke to him?
Like I said, 8, 9, 10 years ago. Like it's that long ago.
Yeah, right. Okay.
It's like I don't talk to the man. He's not a person I ever ring.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't talk to him. I don't like the way he has managed many of his players and what he does and how he holds clubs to ransom. But clubs, you sort of, if you dance with the devil, you got to know what to expect, okay? And that's why the Roosters have a policy. They don't deal with him. When a couple of players were managed by him and refused to get rid of him as their manager, they got rid of the players. This is only just recently kids coming through. Ricky Stewart at the Canberra Raiders doesn't deal with him. He gutted the Raiders a couple of times. And in the end, and the last time he gutted them because they refused to deal with him and be bullied into signing players. Because any club does this, when you have too many players at one club under one manager, they get the balance of power shifts, and they can begin to dictate a little bit to the clubs. They can say, well, if you don't sign this guy, I'm not going to let you sign this guy. And they can be pushed around like that. And it gets worse when the coach is managed by by the same manager that's managing the players. So the NRL are currently looking at this. There should be a rule in place that if you're a coach, if you manage a coach, you're simply not allowed to have any players at that club. That should be the rule. The manager has to either forfeit the coach or forfeit the players at the club. Okay, that should be the rule.
That's a big call.
Well, what happens is clubs get themselves into trouble over this. Okay, so like I said, they get themselves into trouble. They allow too many players at the club to sign up with them to be able to, and then, like I said, if they don't want to sign one player, the manager says, if you don't want to sign him, you're not going to keep him, and that pressure increases threefold when it becomes the coach as well. Okay, if you don't re-sign this coach, he's not going that well. If you don't re-sign this coach, I might take your star player to another club.
Yeah.
So you got all these little things that happening within the club, right? Isaac Moses is the best at exploiting that. The smart clubs have realised that and don't deal with it. They just simply say, mate, we're not going to go down this track again. The Roosters had their deal. Nick Politis said years ago he won't deal with Isaac Moses. He eventually broke his own rule by signing Suaalii, and then he came for a couple of years, starred, and Moses took him out of the Roosters and took him to rugby mid contract, and that's the whole thing. The concern I would have if I am any club dealing with Isaac Moses is the contract does not mean anything. Now, in this case, all that Lachlan Galvin has done, though, is said, I'm not re-signing my contract. He hasn't looked to break his contract. I'm sure that was probably going to come at some point. I'm pretty sure the deal with Parramatta has not been signed, but has been done. Now, will he end up at Parramatta? Balance of probability, absolutely. Why do I have some hesitation? Because if this guy is willing to break contracts, then he can break whatever tentative agreement he's already got with the Eels. Legally, he's not allowed to talk to the Eels, so they can't even begin to talk to it. But this whole situation is just out of control. And what the Tigers have done this week by bringing Lachlan Galvin is just completely undermined whatever stance they tried to take last week. The players came out, team first from Luai.
Earn back respect.
Earn back the respect. Benji said he'll go to play reserve grade and he'll come back when he earns back the respect of his teammates. Later in the week, that narrative changed a little bit from earning back the respect of his teammates to he was actually in reserve grade to just try and protect him, which is bullshit, right? To protect him from the fan backlash and all the rest of it. You know, if that's the case, you've thrown him in the Leichhardt Oval this week. So let's see how that goes. But the Tigers have begun to backtrack. Lachlan Galvin, I just think, is a 19-year-old kid. His manager is ruthless. His manager has no affection for West Tigers. He doesn't care that he's gutting West Tigers by taking this kid away.
Why is that? Why can a manager potentially dislike a club? We don't know if he does or not.
I don't know. Look, I don't know what it is. Look, but he has. I don't know whether it goes back to when the big four, when he had Moses had Tedesco, Mitch Moses, Aaron Woods, and Luke Brooks, and the four of them, and basically the club got a little bit aggressive towards him back then. And I think if you remember, Ivan Cleary was coach and put a deadline on the players to resign. And Isaac Moses just said, well, mate, stick that up your bum, and took three of them away straight off. And so that plan backfired. That threat backfired. But I don't know where this dispute goes back and what the core part of it is. But it could be just as simple as, mate, they just don't like each other. They don't like the way they do business and a response to how you do business. I think that's got certainly something to do with it.
I don't know Isaac Moses. I'm not a puppet of his. I've got nothing to do with him. If you walk past me, I wouldn't know. Yeah. However, if I'm coming from the player's perspective or Isaac Moses' perspective, I'm saying all I'm doing is doing the best for the player.
That's exactly, Warren. That's true. That's 100% true. And that's why, everybody's getting upset about what I've said about the Tigers. The Tigers are the ones that blew this. They put that statement out last week to head off criticism that was going to come later in the year where it would have looked like they missed him, okay?
As a smother of sorts.
Well, they did that to sort of try and get it out there. But what it also did is it put all the focus on Galvin about what he's done. And the fans have pretty quickly turned on Galvin, okay? A lot of them. And what I find fascinating, Parramatta fans didn't turn on Dylan Brown like this. Manly fans didn't turn on Daly Cherry Evans like this. When essentially both those players have done what This kid's done. That's all. You know what I mean?
If anything,
response to the Tigers fans has been quite aggressive.
If anything, what Galvin did was better because he gave them more notice. He gave them 18 months' notice to rebuild their roster.
He's given them 18 months' notice, and that's all he said. If you read his statement, and people have said to me, he disrespected the coach by saying he didn't think Benji could coach, right? Let me say this about people talk about Benji. If you can't learn off Benji, who can you learn off? That is the greatest pile of rubbish statement I ever hear, right? Yes, Benji was a great 5'8", okay? So was Wally Lewis. Couldn't coach, though. So was Terry Lamb. Coached the Tigers. Couldn't coach them to do much, right? Wayne Pearce wasn't a great coach at the Tigers. There's a lot of players, ex-players, who were great footballers who don't turn out to be great coaches. And then on the flip side, Trent Robinson wasn't much of a player, pretty good coach. Cameron Ciraldo wasn't much of a player, pretty good coach.
Craig Bellamy.
Yeah, well, there you go. Like Craig Bellamy, they're not building statues in Canberra of him as a player, Craig Bellamy, but I'll tell you what, they'll build one in Melbourne of him as a coach. You know what I mean? So that's the way it goes. Coaching is teaching. And a lot of coaches, one of the complaints, or not a complaint, one of the concerns I think people have with Benji is sometimes they sit there at training and the Tigers are going through a drill and the halves can't quite get the drill right. So Benji jumps in and says, this is how you do it, boom, 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 and sort of takes over. And while it's great because it gets the pass out and ball work flows on, the 5'8" still hasn't learned how to do it, or the halfback still hasn't learned how to do it because Benji's jumped in and done it. You've got to teach them how to do it. That's what it's all about. And so I don't know where, this criticism like that has come, like people saying that Lachlan Galvin is entitled to think what's best for his future. He's done that. I get Tigers fans don't like it. I don't like the way it's been handled, but I think it all began with the response from the Tigers before Moses. Moses now, though, is playing hardball. He's brought in Arthur Moses, who's a relative of his, who's a very, very good lawyer, a senior counsel. He's got him in, who's going to push on with this workplace bullying claim. Now, this is not really because I think he's been really bullied out of the team. There's been a couple of little ordinary things of late. But essentially, it's just to start putting some pressure on now the Tigers to sit down.
It's a chess move, right?
Well, it's a chess move, yeah. And it's just to try and, let's mediate and let's see if we can come up with a release for this year, if not before June 30, which I think is still possible. Given the way how bad this has turned, I think a June 30 release is possible. Although that said, we now wait and see what happens this week when he goes back to Leichhardt Oval against Cronulla. And if they can make it work and they can bury the hatchet a little bit, he might stay on.
Because he's not on a lot of money, right? So it makes sense to try and keep him and plan ahead. If they can keep him for the next 18 months, then you can plan ahead. They only pay $250 this year, $350 next year. It's not a lot of money for starting six.
No, it's not. It's not a lot of money. And look, he won't be getting upgraded at the Tigers if he does. But look, the other thing is his manager just won't allow that. His manager knows he can go to Parramatta next year for close to $1 million.
So let's.
Why would he keep him at Tigers next year? He will agitate until he gets released. It's inevitable where this is heading. What they are best doing is getting in a room and sorting it out before there's too much blood on the floor. Because if it continues this way, there's not going to be a winner out of this. Like every club's got their skeletons. They've already started to bring up a couple of players in the State Cup and the Sydney Cup below that, who are. And the reason they're important is because they are contracted in the Tigers' top 30. Okay, so they're on the Tigers' salary cap in their top 30 players, but they're not in the squad. And there's been accusations that they have also been bullied. Now, one of those players is also managed by Moses, but it's just going to get ugly. They need to sort it out. They need to move on, and they need to just sit there and just go, you know what? Let's just get it out of the papers. Let's try and turn the black ink over to another club for the time being. Like this was all about Daly Cherry Evans a fortnight ago, and they've just stolen all that headlines since then, and not really in a way that they like.
I get Tigers fans are pissed off, but from Lachlan Galvin's perspective, he's a Parramatta fan, right?
Yeah.
And if you talk to anybody, whatever if you're playing for a team that you didn't grow up supporting and you've got an opportunity to move to another team for more money, you're going to take it, right? You're going to go and play for your boyhood team, surely.
Yeah, I think so. Like, but let's talk to a lot of players. Like Nathan Highmarsh grew up a Canterbury fan.
Mm.
You know what I mean? He's now a Parramatta legend, and Parramatta is his club. You look at Mark Guy grew up a Manly fan. Like you don't always get to play for your team, but he did come through the Parramatta juniors and whatnot. And I just think, like I just think he thinks that there's just more upside going to a club playing alongside Mitch Moses. I think that's the real appeal to him. I don't think he's really particularly happy at West Tigers. I think there's a little bit, I don't quite know what it is, but there's a little bit going on in the background. And he just wants out. And again, he didn't come out and say I want an immediate release. He didn't say he wanted a release for next year. He just said, I will not be resigning beyond 2026, which is when I'm contracted to. And the Tigers dumped him, said he'll come back when he earns the respect of his teammates. Well, what changed? They went out and got beat by the team running last. Like it was just a dumb move. The team running last beat them on the weekend. They needed him in there. They needed him there. Whether it would have changed the result, I don't know. But in hindsight, you just look at it now and you go, well, could have done any worse.
Let's hypothesise for a minute, right? So say he plays well, but they negotiate a release in the background. We're assuming he goes to Parramatta.
Yeah.
So Dylan Brown then goes to Newcastle, if they can afford him.
Well, that all depends. Dylan Brown's already on good money at Parramatta, and to get to Newcastle, they'd have to try and free up some room somewhere. But as the season gets later, we get closer. The financial year for the NRL players runs from November 1 to October 31. So every month we get closer.
So we're 6 months through now, right?
Well, yeah, we're 6 months through now.
And Newcastle did get rid of Will Price at the start of March.
Yeah.
So that he was on, say, 400. So there's 200 there.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of money there. They might be able to come to some kind of deal to get Dylan Brown up there early. I don't think Parramatta will let him go though early. To get Galvin, maybe. But I do think that the Eels are pretty sort of content with this year, and I think they're hoping to get Galvin next year.
And none of those trades, although it sounds great for everybody to talk about it, I don't know one that's ever happened where there's been players go on from different positions. I mean, Harry Grant was one, but that was very different,
Oh, he was just he was a loner, you know what I mean? They sent him to Tigers just to play there as a loan because he was so good. He was demanding to play first grade, but Cameron Smith was still going and he couldn't get past Cameron Smith. So they thought, well, rather than piss him off and keep him in State Cup for another year, they let him go and play first grade at West. And then after that, he sort of satisfied. Then he went back to Melbourne once Smith retired. So, yeah, look, I don't think you do. I just think you got to try and just resolve this situation. It's becoming untenable now. That's got to get used a lot this week. They'll get there soon. I hope they get there soon. There's no plan at the moment, but the fact that Isaac Moses has brought in Arthur Moses is stepping up this bullying and harassment claim, making it legal, is going to force West into a situation where they're going to have to try and mediate and get out of it. And I just think it's just a smart play for everybody.
So if he leaves, right, if we're saying he mediates, then that means he has to leave. So that means he has to go to Parramatta. We're saying he's going to Parramatta.
Not necessarily immediately. I think he'll end up Parramatta where he wants to go. But what does Parramatta do? Do they say to Dylan Brown, go now? If they can't get rid of Dylan Brown, I don't know how they can fit him in. And I don't even know where they're playing with Mitch Moses and Dylan Brown there. I don't think you're really going to try and stick him in at lock just yet, okay? But he is, that's part of, I think, the concern why he wanted to go out of the Tigers is because there's this thought around the Tigers that it'll end up a lock. And you can end up in that sort of weird halfland when you play lock and 5/8, where you don't sort of quite get there. You're not really considered as a lock. You're not really considered as a 5/8, which could really hamper you for your rep chances and things like that. So out of all that, he will go somewhere, but I just don't know if he'll go to Parramatta straight away this year because I just don't know where they can play him this year. But if Parramatta can somehow move Dylan Brown on to Newcastle, then that's what it. That's what they'll do. But for that to happen first, though, they've got to get permission to speak, Warren. And at the moment, they don't. So that's what this mediation will be all about. We'll be trying to say, okay, let us go to market. Clearly, Parramatta are sitting there. Jason Riles on the weekend was saying, look, He's a good young player. We're keen. If he comes to the market, we're going to take a look at him. The Bulldogs have come out. They've declared that they've got no interest in him. Manly and South have said that they won't be looking at him. Roosters, even though they've got a little bit of room in their cap, they've got enough young kids coming through in the halves, but also they just don't deal with Isaac Moses, so they're not looking at him. There's not a lot of clubs there who really are right at the moment available for him to play. Like, it just looks more and more like, I said Parramatta here a week ago. He'll go to Parramatta. Now, like I said, I'm convinced that's where he was going to go. I think it's primarily done. I don't want to say it. When I say it's primarily done, I think it's all but the contract has been signed. It's all done with that, and that's where he'll go. He'll sit there and he'll work it out. But so many dominoes have to fall to make it work. But the Tigers have got to get on this right now and just get it going, because get him back in first grade, get him playing, try and smooth it over as much as they can, but also start having the grown-up conversation behind the scenes with the Chief Executive, Shane Richardson, with Isaac Moses, who he doesn't get on with. Richo's been very strong through all this, that he was protecting Benji throughout the whole negotiation, and that's why they've had a fallout. Well, okay, protect the club. Get out there and do what's right for the Tigers. Leave the egos out of this and get the deal done.
Okay, say Moose, final thing on that. Say Moose before June 30, he goes to Parramatta, Dylan Brown goes to Newcastle. Is there a player that comes down to Tigers?
Well,
you think of anyone?
No, I haven't. Look, the obvious one is Jackson Hastings, but he's already done his dash at the Tigers, okay? But Newcastle are desperate for...
Pierce Paul?
I don't think so. I just don't think he's what... Look, he could be like that.
He's off contract.
Yeah, but they might take him. But that's all to be discussed. Like, there's so much that has to happen.
Fantasy,
and for Newcastle to even start to begin thinking that way, which they haven't, but for them to have to think that way, first Galvin has to get released from Tigers. Parramatta have to sign him, and then Parramatta have to release Dylan Brown. Like, a lot has to happen.
Yeah.
Newcastle don't need that headache at the moment. They've got enough headaches of their own with other things. So, that won't happen.
Well, let's talk about that, actually, Newcastle.
Yeah.
What the hell's going on there?
Look, Adam O'Brien came out after it and took offence to, criticisms of the game on the weekend. And he said, no, look, the effort was there, right? Now, first off, when you start talking effort, that's almost like last resort to defend your team.
Death rattle.
It is, yeah. It's just generally the coaches are generally starting to talk about their team effort. They dug in the boys, all this sort of bullshit, and they say that because they've really got nothing else to talk to, right? And it's a way of praising the players who haven't really done much right. Newcastle's attack is appalling at the moment. They did have the effort. So to Adam O'Brien's point, defensively, they dug in. They defended their line. They turned up. They had a crack defensively. But they've got no idea in attack. Their halves are not setting up any shapes. They are looking like they are just going from play to play. Get tackled. What do we do now? Someone runs the ball. They throw a few passes around. Get tackled. What are we doing now? They're not setting up. They're not going for a point on the field. I don't think either half is a natural organiser. Jackson Hastings is on $800,000 there, and he's on the nose there. He's the one that they should be bringing back, but he's on so much on the nose, they're not even contemplating it.
If I'm Adam O'Brien, right, and my job's on the line, because I think it should be, right? He has made the finals 4 out of 5 times.
Yeah, I don't know if he's on the job's on the line, but he's certainly under pressure.
He's under pressure.
He needs them to start performing.
So why? It doesn't matter how much you disagree with a player. You'd still look at bringing Jackson Hastings back, wouldn't you?
Look, Jackson Hastings, you could sit a dozen psychologists down, and I don't think one of them would figure him out, okay? Like, he is hard to get a read on, and for whatever reason, he's not popular with many of his teammates, and he just doesn't gel with the team, and that's been the history of wherever he's been at, Warren. So it looks like he's finally worn out his welcome at the Knights, after wearing out his welcome at a couple of other clubs before that, Roosters, where Manly, West,
St. George, blah, blah, blah.
Like he's just worn out his welcome wherever he's been. I don't know what they did, but they need his kind of player at the side. They need what he brings to the team. They should be bringing him back. But the flip side is you've got to have some sort of team harmony, a little bit like West were trying to sell us last week. You've got to have some kind of team harmony. And Adam O'Brien and the players clearly think that what he brings doesn't outweigh what he'll problems he'll cause in other areas. So that's where that starts. Now, I don't know, but what I'll say is they are really in some trouble the way they are attacking at the moment. It's just listless. They just go from left to right, and okay, we'll have a hit up, and it's like they have a settler for a hit up. That's that sort of brainless sort of just attack. There's just nothing to it. The halves are good, they're energetic, they try hard. I think they're a little bit slow, and they're just not organising halves like the Knights need.
Mate, the opposite of that yesterday was Mitchell Moses. How good was that?
There you go. Yeah, and that just shows you straight away what a class halfback can do. And Parramatta instantly looked like a new team. Dylan Brown suddenly became the player that we all thought he could be. You could see suddenly he grew himself in all that. Parramatta just, look, we knew that they were going to struggle without him, and that foot injury taking so long to get over was going to be a hassle for him. But they just look a different team. They'll start to bounce now. The interesting thing is that just above them on the ladder is Roosters and Penrith. So if Parramatta start hitting form, Penrith look like they're going to start hitting some form. Roosters are starting to find a little bit themselves.
They played well the other night.
Yeah, so they're all so what's going to happen? So they all start to push their way through the ladder. I don't know who's going to fall down and take that last spot, but that last spot's been the hardest thing to pick all year so far.
We don't want to talk about Origin selection, but
we will.
But we will. What does Laurie do there? He's got 3 great players there now. Luai, Moses, and of course Cleary.
Cleary, I think Laurie's just itching to coach Cleary, so I think he'll pick him. And if Moses can play another game like he did and keep that form up on the weekend, Monday, I think there's a chance Moses, who grew a leg last year in Origin, I think there's a chance he goes to 6 and they try and play those two as the halves. Which could be pretty exciting the way that they're going. So 2 big boots too. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So look, I think that sounds pretty special if you could have those two. Mitch Moses, he found himself last year in Origin without Cleary there. So how do you, I don't think he can pick one. I think he's got to pick them both. Yeah, it was fantastic yesterday. Another team which was really exciting on the weekend was Penrith. Yeah, they found their form too. They suddenly they knew what they had to do. Cleary sort of changed his game a little bit. I think he's a little bit simpler. They played a little bit simpler, and the guys that are coming into the side found their way. Do you think they can win 10 from 17 to make the finals? Yeah, I do. Yeah. Even through Origin. Oh look. They don't have a lot of depth, do they? That's going to be the hard. Yeah, that's going to be the hard period. But they won't have a lot of games. I think they'll be without those players at most 2 games. At most, I'll have a look at the draw, but at most 2 games. But 10 from 17 they've got to win. I think they can win that. They're too good a side not to win that. That's just over 50% to be fair. 8.5, 50%. That's only a game and a half ahead of that. Yep. That's it. So I think they can get there. Yeah, I think the Penrith will make the semis. I don't think they'll make top 4 though, which would be interesting. Be interesting. So whether they can come out of the top 4 and win the comp, I don't think any team can this year. But if someone's going to do it, it's going to be Penrith after 4 straight premierships. Yeah, excellent. Kenty, good to be back, and that's it for us today. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks.